From the moment Wolfgang Van Halen picked up a guitar, people didn't see him, they saw his father. Eddie Van Halen wasn't just a rock legend, he was a once-in-a-lifetime musician whose name became sacred in guitar history. For Wolfgang, growing up with that legacy was both an honor and a burden. He loved his father deeply, but he also knew that anything he did would be compared to the band that changed music forever. Being a Van Halen, he once said, means you're never just yourself, and that truth haunted him for years. Wolfgang's childhood was surrounded by guitars, amps, and the constant buzz of Van Halen rehearsals. He'd watch his father create riffs that defined generations, but behind those walls of sound were quiet moments of pain. Eddie battled health problems and personal demons, and Wolfgang saw both the genius and the struggle. While most fans only saw the rock god, Wolfgang saw the fragile man behind the legend, and deep down he promised himself he'd carry the name, but not the same path. In 2006, at just 15 years old, Wolfgang was asked to join Van Halen as bassist. It sounded like a dream, but for Wolfgang, it was also terrifying. How do you replace Michael Anthony, one of the most loved members? How do you stand beside your father and make it your own? The pressure was immense. Fans doubted him, critics dismissed him, and yet Wolfgang played every show like it was his last, because deep down, he knew he was living inside history, even if it wasn't truly his. As the tour began, the internet turned brutal. Nepotism. Kid can't play. He's only there because of his dad. Wolfgang read it all. He'd smile on stage, but behind that smile was a young man crushed by judgment. Still, Eddie stood beside him like a shield. "You're doing amazing, Wolf," his father would say. Those words mattered more than any applause. It was father and son, fighting the noise together. Wolfgang and Eddie weren't just bandmates, they were best friends. On stage, they shared a language that needed no words. Eddie's smile every time he turned to watch Wolfgang play told a story of pure pride. "It was the happiest time of his life," Wolfgang later said. But behind the curtain, Eddie's health was fading, and every show felt like a countdown. Wolfgang knew the inevitable was coming, but nothing could prepare him for the silence that would follow. When Eddie Van Halen passed away in 2020, Wolfgang's world collapsed. He didn't just lose a father, he lost his bandmate, his mentor, his compass. For months, Wolfgang couldn't even look at a guitar. Music, once a source of joy, became a reminder of everything he'd lost. People kept asking if Van Halen would continue, but Wolfgang knew, without Dad, there is no Van Halen. After Eddie's death, fans began begging for a Van Halen tribute tour. "It's what your father would have wanted," they said, but Wolfgang didn't see it that way. To him, bringing back the band felt like desecrating something sacred. "Van Halen was Dad," he said. "Without him, it doesn't exist." That statement shocked fans, but it came from a place of love, not anger. Wolfgang didn't want to live in his father's shadow. He wanted to protect it. Instead of continuing Van Halen, Wolfgang started his own project, Mammoth WVH. The name was a tribute. Before Van Halen existed, Eddie's early band was called Mammoth. But this time, it was all Wolfgang. He wrote, played, and sang every part of the debut album himself. It was raw, emotional, and deeply personal. He wasn't trying to be his dad, he was trying to be himself. The song Distance became Wolfgang's way of saying goodbye. Written for Eddie, the lyrics were heartbreak in melody form. When fans heard it, they cried with him. It wasn't just another rock song, it was a son talking to his father in heaven. "This is how I stay close to him," Wolfgang said. Through Mammoth WVH, he found healing and freedom. As offers poured in for tribute shows, Wolfgang kept saying no, not because he didn't love Van Halen, but because he refused to turn his father's memory into a business. "I'm not going to play Panama without him," he said firmly. Fans didn't always understand, but those who truly listened saw the deeper truth. Wolfgang's love for Eddie was too sacred to commercialize. When Wolfgang said he didn't want to perform Van Halen songs, headlines screamed, "Ungrateful son." But Wolfgang didn't flinch. "I'm proud of what my dad did," he said, "but I'm not him. I'm me." It was a rare act of artistic courage, to walk away from the world's biggest rock legacy just to find your own voice. And slowly, the world began to respect him for it. When Mammoth WVH debuted live, fans were stunned. Wolfgang could play everything: guitar, bass, drums, keys, and he did it with passion. Songs like Epiphany and You're to Blame showed his range. The critics who once called him the lucky kid now called him the real deal. For the first time, Wolfgang wasn't Eddie's son. He was Wolfgang Van Halen, the artist. In interviews, Wolfgang admits it took him years to stop defining himself through Van Halen. "It'll always be part of me," he says, "but it's not me." He stopped chasing his father's approval because deep down, he already had it. Eddie's pride lived in every chord Wolfgang played. Letting go didn't mean forgetting. It meant moving forward with love. Wolfgang doesn't run from the Van Halen name anymore. He honors it quietly, through his own sound, his own choices, and his refusal to fake nostalgia. "Dad would have hated me copying him," he says. "He taught me to be original." In that sense, Wolfgang is the purest reflection of Eddie's spirit, not by imitation, but by innovation. Today, when asked about doing anything Van Halen, Wolfgang answers honestly, "It's complicated, because it's not just a band, it's his family, his love, his loss." But in every note of Mammoth WVH, you can still hear Eddie's influence, alive, subtle, eternal. Wolfgang doesn't need to carry the torch. He is the torch. And that's what makes his story so powerful.